Billings up to Clark. Clark takes her first shot. Finds herself down low, kicks it out to Caitlin Clark. Clark puts it up. Getting themselves prepared for the World Cup that they've already qualified for, but really not letting their foot off the glass on offense.
What if I told you the biggest story in women's basketball right now isn't what happened on the court? It's what they tried to hide from you. Because the mainstream sports media right now is working overtime, pushing this clean, polite narrative that everything is normal, that Caitlin Clark starting on the bench was just a coach's decision, a respectful nod to the veterans, a simple strategy after a long break. But come on, anyone actually watching the game knows that explanation doesn't pass the eye test. That wasn't strategy. That was panic. That was the old guard of the WNBA trying to slow down something they know they can't control. Because the reality is brutal, Caitlin Clark isn't just another player returning from injury. She's the most disruptive force this league has ever seen. And the moment she steps on that hardwood, the entire power structure shifts. You could see it in the numbers, in the tempo, in the way the defense started collapsing before she even made a move. 17 points, 12 assists, and a +35 impact in limited minutes. That's not just a good performance, that's a takeover in progress. Clark bends the geometry of the court. Defenses start reacting to threats that haven't even happened yet. Her passing turns average possessions into automatic buckets, like she's running some high-speed algorithm while everyone else is still thinking 2 plays behind. It's like keeping the most advanced weapon in the league sitting on the bench because the veterans in the building are scared of what happens when the future finally takes over the room. And when she finally checked into the game, the entire arena felt the shift. Now watch what happened next, because the moment Clark got her rhythm, everything changed.
To what Caitlin Clark is going to do in year 3, you know what? I don't blame Breanna Stewart, Brianna Turner, Nafisa Collier, Aneka Ogwumike if they say themselves, we can't get beat like this. This girl is coming for revenge.
That right there, you could literally hear the tension in the analysis. The hesitation, the nervous energy, the kind of tone that tells you something bigger is going on beneath the surface. And honestly, you can't even blame players like Breanna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, or the rest of the league's elite veterans for feeling that pressure. Because what we're watching right now isn't just basketball, it's psychological warfare inside the Women's National Basketball Association. For the last decade, these superstars built the league, stacked championships, built their brands, and earned every bit of respect they get. But now they're staring at a player who doesn't just compete within the system, she completely rewrites it. That's the difference with Caitlin Clark. Stewart, Collier, those players are generational talents, no question. But they still operate within the traditional rhythm of the game. Clark. She detonates the rhythm entirely. The pace speeds up, the defense stretches farther than it's built to handle, and suddenly the entire court feels tilted in one direction. Think about this, she was away from the game for more than 200 days, yet the moment she returned, there wasn't a hint of rust. Cross-court lasers, weak side reads happening in milliseconds, defenses scrambling before the play even develops. That's the kind of impact that keeps coaches up at night watching film. Because at that point, they're not studying strategy anymore, they're studying survival. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Because behind the scenes, this is also about locker room politics. The decision to roll with veterans like Chelsea Gray in the starting lineup sends a clear message about hierarchy in the league. The media loves the idea that young players should wait their turn, respect the veterans, earn their spot slowly. But professional sports doesn't work like that anymore. This is a results business. If the league is shifting into a faster, more explosive era, the teams that recognize that shift survive, and the ones that cling to the old structure get left behind. Real leadership isn't protecting your spot because of a resume from 3 seasons ago. Real leadership is recognizing when the future has arrived and making the adjustment before the league forces your hand. And what happened next on the court? That's when the pressure inside the arena really started boiling over. Just watch this next moment.
Clearly the best player. The team, if you can believe it, looked night and day. Clark on the floor, Clark on the bench. Clark on the floor, ball's moving, pace is flowing, Clark on the bench.
That sequence right there says everything. The difference is night and day. When Caitlin Clark is on the floor, the entire rhythm of the game transforms. The ball is flying, the pace is pushing, the offense suddenly feels alive. But the moment she sits and the traditional system takes over, you can feel the energy drop inside the arena. The offense slows down, possessions get predictable, and defenses suddenly look comfortable again. That's the contrast people keep ignoring inside the Women's National Basketball Association. When veteran point guards like Chelsea Gray are running the sets, the offense becomes methodical. Slow half-court actions, long possessions, plenty of time for the defense to reset and lock in. But when Clark crosses that line onto the hardwood, the entire tempo explodes. The transition game becomes lethal. The ball never sticks in one place. It zips around the floor like it's running on some high-speed algorithm, instantly finding the open shooter or the rolling big before the defense can even establish their shell. That's why people watching the numbers can't ignore what's happening. The contrast is so obvious it almost feels unreal. And yet somehow the coaching staff still tried to frame this as a bench rotation decision. That's where the frustration comes in, because when the numbers scream one thing and the politics push another, fans start asking serious questions. And here's the truth the veterans already understand, even if nobody wants to say it out loud. Players like Gray and the old guard can feel the shift happening in real time. They know exactly what the floor looks like when Clark isn't out there. They can sense the crowd energy dip, the momentum stall. And then the second she checks back in, the building changes. The noise rises, the pressure builds, and suddenly every possession feels like it could turn into a highlight. That's the kind of gravitational pull only a handful of players in basketball history have ever had. But what happened in the very next sequence, that's when things got even more uncomfortable for the veterans watching this unfold.
You know what a real vet would do? A real vet would say, you know what? Here's my spot. I ain't competing with that. You know what? We're a better team if you take my spot and I try to fit in where I can.
You know what a real vet does in a moment like that? A real vet looks at the situation and says, you know what? That's the future right there. Let's build around it. But that's not what we're seeing. Instead, you've got veterans still gripping the steering wheel while the entire vehicle of the Women's National Basketball Association is being launched into a new era by an engine they don't control. That's where the tension really comes from. Instead of sliding into that stabilizing mentor role for the second unit, the old hierarchy is trying to stay front and center, and the result early in that game was ugly. Slow starts, messy possessions, turnovers piling up, and an opening quarter that looked completely disconnected. Then the moment Caitlin Clark checked in, boom. Instantly the game simplified. That flawless pick and roll with Monique Billings, that wasn't just a bucket. That was a loud, undeniable statement. Because Clark processes defensive coverage at a speed that most players on the floor simply can't match. She sees the trap before it forms, reads the rotation before it happens, and suddenly teammates who are struggling to create their own shot are getting perfect looks at the rim. And that ripple effect spreads everywhere. You could see it with players like Angel Reese, Ryan Howard, Paige Buchers, even rising talent like Camila Cardoso. Their offensive games elevate the moment Clark starts orchestrating the floor. Take the so-called rivalry with Reese. The media loves pushing that storyline like it's a zero-sum battle. But when you actually watch the raw tape, the truth is way more dangerous for the rest of the league. When Clark and Reese share the floor, the pick and roll becomes a nightmare to defend. Clark's shooting gravity drags two defenders out to the perimeter, and suddenly there's Reese rolling straight to the rim for an easy lob. That's not just effective, it's practically unguardable. Now add Buchers into that backcourt mix and things get even crazier. Defenses can't collapse on Clark's drive because Buchers is waiting on the wing ready to fire. Blitz Buchers, and Clark is already relocating for a demoralizing deep three. At that point, the defense is solving an equation with no solution. And that's why the decision to keep Clark on the bench earlier becomes even more baffling. Because when she's on the floor, everyone's production skyrockets. The entire ecosystem becomes more efficient, more explosive, more profitable in basketball terms. Which leads to the most controversial part of this whole conversation. Because for a lot of fans watching this performance, it brings back memories of the debate surrounding the 2024 Summer Olympics roster decisions involving United States Women's National Basketball Team. For months, the explanation was simple: rest, experience, timing. But after watching Clark control a game like this, people around the league are starting to ask a much bigger question. And what was revealed after that might be the most explosive part of this entire story.
Folks, this is why she wasn't on the team in 2024. They know she would have came in dominating. She would have came in wrecking-ish. And
that last moment right there, that's exactly why this debate has exploded all over the basketball world. Because when you watch a performance like that from Caitlin Clark, it instantly brings the conversation back to the decision that shocked fans during the 2024 Summer Olympic cycle. A lot of people around the sport believed the explanation was simple: timing, experience, roster balance for the United States Women's National Basketball Team. But after seeing the way Clark controls the pace, the spacing, and the entire offensive ecosystem, fans started asking a different question. What if she had been on that roster? What if the moment she stepped on the international stage, the entire offense began running through her? Because let's be real, Clark doesn't ease into games. She changes them immediately. And that's the part that makes this whole situation so fascinating. When Clark is on the floor, everything around her becomes more valuable. Teammates get easier shots, transition opportunities explode, and defenses start scrambling just trying to keep up. That's why this return game felt bigger than just one performance. It felt like a signal to the entire Women's National Basketball Association that the next era is already here. 17 points, 12 assists, and a massive +35 impact in limited minutes. Those numbers didn't just show efficiency, they showed influence. The kind of influence that shifts the balance of power in a league. And that's why the conversation about starting roles, rotations, and team hierarchy is getting louder. Because when a player has that level of gravity on the court, the smartest move for any coaching staff is simple: build the system around what works best. Let the pace run faster. Let the spacing open the floor. Let the playmaker orchestrate the chaos that defenses can't solve. That's where the modern game is heading. So the real question now isn't whether Clark can dominate, we've already seen that. The real question is how quickly teams are willing to adapt to the new reality she brings every time she steps on the court. Because if this performance was just the beginning, the rest of the league might be in serious trouble this season. And if you love breaking down the biggest moments, rivalries, and power shifts in the WNBA, make sure you subscribe to WNBA Vibe and hit the notification bell, because the next chapter of this story is going to be absolutely wild.